The weather is still very variable. It's changing from overcast to sun to light rain to downpours. So I'm just doing some maintenance under the tarp in the meantime until it looks nicer. And I'm going to reverse the line on my spools. I love Braid. I switched to it from mono, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago and never looked back. I don't think I've spooled a reel with mono since I started using Braid. There are some times when mono is good, but and it's cheap, but for a season of use I'd rather pay a little bit more for Braid. But there are two problems with Braid. A, it's expensive, and B, the dark color of the line fades with use, and it frays a little bit. However, this is 30-pound Braid, and it's still pretty strong. Even with that fraying, it's still got tons of strength, and you can bring in just about any fish on it. So I don't want to throw it out, but I do want to get rid of this light color. So the thing to do there, save yourself buying another spool of Braid, is just to reverse it. It's a bit of a tedious, laborious process. You have to manually remove the line. So I'm going to start spooling it onto this piece from the stick stove, which is just something I grabbed, which works out perfectly because it's got a lip on both sides to keep the line on it. And it's also a good diameter for this. It's easy to hold in your hand, but also takes quite a bit of line with each time around. So this is a pretty perfect implement for doing this. So anyway, just have to keep doing this until I get to the mono backing on this reel. And then I'm going to reel this line back onto the reel, but the light side first. One important thing I completely forgot there, luckily I remembered just in time before I did the whole thing, is you need to start the light end on one side and then move to the dark end at the bottom of the spool on the other end. If you just layer it on top of itself over and over, what you're going to be left with is all the dark braid on top, and then you're going to have to start by reeling that onto your reel, and it's going to be at the back of the reel again. So that's pointless. What I want to do is, once I've got all the line onto here, I want to start with the light line so that that's at the back of the spool. So I'm going to carefully put it onto the left side, and I'll leave that tag end hanging there so I can easily grab it when it's time to start, and just slowly, very, very slowly transition to the other side of your whatever thing you're using to put the line onto. Alright, so there's one spool, and you can see the fade from light to dark. I also kind of did it a little loose so that the overlap doesn't pin down the line, because sometimes you're going to have line crossing line that's meant to go on the reel before it, and that'll make it hard to reel onto the reel if it's all pinned down tight. So you want to do it kind of loosely. And now I'll start by spooling the light end here with that tag end, and the other end, the dark end, is almost good as new. It doesn't get in the water too much because it is at the back, near the back of the spool. So that's good braid. And even this is good, but what you don't want is this light line close to your lure, because the basic attributes of color are that white reflects light and therefore is more visible, and dark absorbs light and therefore is less visible, which is good. So now to get this on the spool. So as I mentioned, I've got the mono backing on the spool there, because mono is cheap and it helps fill up the spool. It's pretty rare that you need the full spool to cast or even to troll. So it's just good, another money saving tactic. I think most people know that one. It also stops the braid from slipping on the spool. If you tie braid straight onto a spool, it slips. I think your drag is broken, but I returned a reel one time before I knew that years ago. Sorry, Walmart. So now I tied the double uni knot to connect the mono with the braid. I've got the light end of the braid there, and all I have to do now is reel it off the spool. And as you're reeling, you want it to come off the spool the same direction on your fishing reel spool. And you also want to have this facing you, or facing the wherever you're reeling from. So if I'm reeling from here, I want the line to be coming off this way to me, not over and over. That's gonna contribute to line twist on your spool. As I'm reeling this on, I like to hold the line here in order to keep it pretty taut as it's being spooled. You can also, instead of doing this, you could just let out all your line when you're on the water, and then, with the lure on it, and then reel it back, and the lure will provide natural tension to spool it tightly. But then the first time you're spooling it, it won't be necessarily spooled to the right length. It's coming off the 6 stove spool really easily because of the fade from light to dark. Again, that's really crucial to taking it off the spool in the first place. Otherwise, it's going to be a battle to get it back off in the direction that you want. I'm almost through here. There. That's all of it. Now I just got to tie back on my fluoro leader, and that's it. And it's so much easier when you're with a person and they can hold the spool for you like this, and you can stand over that way and then reel it off of this. But you just have to get creative. So I put my big forceps through one of the holes there, and then held that down with my foot to keep it on the ground so that I could lift off of it, not around it. And that's it. Just saved myself 20 bucks of a new braid spool. Just got to put the 20-pound fluoro leader on. I like to use my wingspan as an approximate length for my leader. And then it gives me a bit of room to snip it down if I need to tie knots over and over. And then it doesn't need replacing as often because it got too short. If I were a douche, I would title this "The Big Secret the Braid Companies Don't Want You to Know." But I absolutely abhor clickbait titles like that. So I will never do that. Nor would this really warrant that. It's not that interesting. It's not that great of a tip. But a few people don't know it, I'm sure. There we go. 2 good looking spools. Dark braid. And saved a 300-yard spool of new braid between the 2 of them. So that's a good 30 bucks right there. It's nice, especially when you don't have a job. And those lures are looking pretty good too. I think it's almost time to get back out there. Hasn't rained for a bit, so maybe I can test these out.